All right, Doug, you ready to get started?
I am, Steve.
All right,
Let's
great.
get started. That sounds
All
good.
right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Mahoney. I'm with the Greater Hartford chapter of SCORE. Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. I'm delighted to be joined today by Doug Stuke, who is with Transform Performance Partners, LLC. Doug is going to be presenting a topic that is very important to any business, regardless of what industry you're in or how big or small you are. And that's 7 things you need to know when hiring your first employee. This is a topic that Doug and I have been spending a lot of time talking about. I think it's going to be great for everybody. I did want to spend a minute or two before we jump in and tell you about SCORE. If you're not familiar with us, we are a nationwide organization made up of about 10,000 volunteers. We've been around for about 50 years, and our sole mission every day is to help small business owners. We provide one-on-one mentoring services. We offer workshops and webinars much like this one. We also have a resource library on our website with a host of information that can help you in running your business. Regardless of what kind of help you're looking for, whether it's marketing or finance or legal or operations or what industry you're in, more than likely, we have a mentor who can help you out. And the best thing about all of our services is that they're free. So if you're interested in learning more about SCORE and what we can do to help you, you can go to score.org and sign up for mentoring services and check out everything we have there. Once again, that's score.org. A couple logistics before we jump in. This session is being recording. We will send out a link to the recording afterwards. So all of you will be able to revisit the content and rewatch the webinar. We will also send out a copy of Doug's PowerPoint slides, which has some great information in here, as well as some links to some websites and his bio information as well, and his contact info. We've also muted everybody's microphones to prevent any background noise. But that being said, we do want to hear from you. So Doug's going to be asking some questions as we go along. Interested in your responses. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat box or put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I will help moderate those for Doug as we go along. But we definitely want to hear your feedback. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Doug. Take it away.
Thanks, Steve. And welcome, everybody. You know, I was inspired to put together this presentation based on my own experiences and a couple things that converged over the last 12 months. So my career, I've spent over 30 years in various HR roles in large organizations like Aetna, CVS, the Hartford, and GE, and equally balanced with time that I spent in startups and IPOs. And throughout that course of my career, I've interviewed thousands of people and hired hundreds. And I recognized this opportunity last year. Almost exactly a year ago, I started my own LLC, Transform Performance Partners, focused on helping organizations, teams, and individuals solve their most pressing people problems. And as it grew, I recognized that I needed to bring on some talent. And that's what I did. And so I do value, and I've used the resources at SCORE, and it inspired me to say, hey, maybe there's some other folks on the journey that I've been on, and they're facing that first hire, and what do I know that I can share? So that's where we're going to be going together, and I've designed it so there will be engagements throughout. So ideally, I'm trying to keep you monotasking instead of multitasking, and I know what I want to cover. But let's start where you are by asking you to think about what is one thing that you would like to cover or like to emerge from today's session with from the time we're spending here together. So your time is the most valuable resource you have. And if you could, type into chat, what is something that's worth this price of admission, the investment you're making in the time that we're here today. And Steve will help call out some of the things that are coming in, but obviously something made this attractive to you to spend your lovely afternoon here. And I'd love to see what's the pressing challenge that folks would like to cover on the call today.
Yeah, so you can put your thoughts in the chat box if you like, and let us know what if there's any key topics you're interested in learning about today. The only one we've got so far, Martin has asked a question about. I know you're not giving expert legal advice here, but he's asked about kind of the litigious society we are and just kind of how you've seen that evolve, and then also asking about recording any interviews, wondering about the legality of that. So that's one question that we have come in. We've got hiring a volunteer. We've got information about contingency employees, the distinction between an employee, a contractor, and other ways of hiring, seasonal businesses as well. What roles do I need to hire, and how do I determine who will fill these roles? Does hourly equate to part-time, even if it's 40 hours a week? Some good questions in there. So classification of employees, how to find employees, how to determine what you need, and how to find them, kind of along
Perfect.
those themes.
Perfect. So that's right in line with where we're going. I will point out at the beginning of this, I do have some resources in here specific to classifications of employees, some wage and hour stuff that you need to be aware of, like that 40-hour question. Number one, this is not legal advice, and the resources that I'm providing today are starting points, but there really is no substitute of, I'm hoping to make everybody aware of where that boundary is, where you have to actually go get some professional advice from the different resources that are available. But we'll definitely cover the majority of those, and we're going to start with an important topic, which is how do you know when it's time to hire, and when is it not the right time to hire? We're going to be getting into best practices that are all tips and hacks and things that I've found over the last 30 years that have been central to the work that I've done in finding, sourcing, and bringing on talent, both primarily as an LLC in the last year. And my goal would be to help you take these best practices and make them your common practices. I'll also touch on some of these watchouts, because if you look under the cover of what your questions are, what your focus is, we all know employing others is not something to be taken casually, and there are lots of tripwires to be aware of. So we're going to cover a lot of general ideas and some guidance, so you don't unintentionally hit some of these tripwires. And towards the end of this, you'll have my contact info, and feel free to connect with me after if there's other lingering questions. But you can see it's 7 things that cover what I consider kind of the life cycle of a hire, which is starting with yourself and working all the way through to how to interview, how to select, and some things to consider to optimize your success through that process. So let's start right with when is it a good time and when is it not a good time to hire? So you probably all face this if you're on this webinar and you're in a position where you're seriously considering, or you perhaps have already brought on some talent. So hiring should always provide a clear line of sight to growth. So that seems obvious, but I've had folks hire for different reasons. And the primary one is that you want to make it an investment. It's both a short term and a long term. We'll talk about that in a few slides. And it should always connect directly to your business strategy. So you can, I'll share an example where I hired someone short term, but I'm actually planning for the long term. So you can mix the two together. And you may actually be in the process of slipping from being a solopreneur into a co-founder, where you are actually at a point where you need to bring on a partner. These are all really, really good times to be bringing on talent. Couple things just to clarify: fill the skill inch wide and a mile deep. This is an example of where you need some deep, generally technical expertise for a very finite amount of time. So for For me, in the last 12 months, I brought on one person who was specific to building my website because he had expertise in Wix pages, how to build them. I brought on another person to help with my search engine optimization. And I brought on yet another person who's helping with my social media and branding. Now, I could have bundled them all together. In fact, I got a quote from one vendor who was going to do all of those for I think it was $5,000 or something. And I decided to find people that were an inch wide and a mile deep. They all could overlap, but I wanted them to come in, do the work, and kind of go away. The other thing is to try before you buy. So this is very common in the workplace where you can use a consultant or a temporary employee because there's a short-term need. And then after a predetermined amount of time, bring them on as an actual employee. We'll talk about that in the next slide when we get into types of employment relationships. That is an area where it can become a slippery slope, and I'll share with you a cautionary tale from one of the world's largest companies when you start to play with that try before you buy model. So the key there is if you have talent coming in, make sure if it's a temporary or a contract employee that it's a well-defined time frame, and that if you decide later to bring them on as a regular employee, that's good. But if you let the timeframes get too extended, or you're making verbal promises about hiring them on full time, that's not good. Under the when not to hire, don't hire out of desperation. And I've had those moments in the last 12 months where I felt either, especially as a solopreneur, like my ability to focus and my bandwidth were becoming limits to this. And it was like, I just want to bring on somebody, for example, who has a sales background, and I'm just going to plug them in and just have them crank the sales machine. And I recognized that that would have been very short-sighted of me, and I was hiring because I needed some revenue to come in. And so it was really desperate. The last two are almost cliche. Friends and family is definitely a minefield if you haven't experienced that yet. It's they can go sideways very quickly despite your best intentions. I have a colleague who brought on a family member, and it was very I'll just say it was very casual until it wasn't. And so that area where, especially if you start getting into compensation or long-term arrangements, you're going to want to be very careful when it comes to employment. Once you know it's a good time, it's really into the basics of understanding the different types of employment relationships. So a quick poll, again, in your chat, you're here because I'm assuming somewhere on your horizon, you're thinking of bringing on an employee of some type. Could you type into chat, like, which of these do you think is most pressing for you? And I've got some general definitions here, 3 buckets. There's regular, and that's folks that literally you're bringing onto a payroll, you're paying payroll taxes on, generally generating a W-2 for. If they make more than $600, it's kind of a requirement, $600 a year. Temporary, which comes through either agencies or you can bring them on as seasonal employees. And then contract, which is very common in startups, is the ability to bring in these other types of folks who are working on contract. So what are we seeing, Steve? Is there
We're seeing a mix of everything. So
okay.
Maria said temporary seasonal, Mike indicated regular, Janet temporary and or contract, Shonda has contract, Vanessa regular, Liza contract, Martin he's in the beginning, freelancers and temps, Eli
Okay.
regular or contract. So we got a good mix of everything.
Okay. Good. Well, let's walk through these then. So, and let me should I start or end with this? Let me think. I'm going to start with this. I'll start with the cautionary tale. So in 1990, Microsoft hired freelancers, a lot of freelancers who were independent contractors to help them with their business. Some of them were actually with Microsoft for over 2 years as temporary contract works. They were fully integrated into the workforce. They had the same hours, the same bosses, in many cases, some of the same work as the people sitting over here. The only difference was the name on the paycheck. The IRS had a problem with that. The IRS found that they were actually deemed employees. And I literally put in 2 links in the bottom here that you'll get with the deck that help define what the IRS considers employees. And once they determined they were employees, they also determined that Microsoft now owned FICA taxes, employment taxes on these folks. And what Microsoft did is they converted some onto regular employees and they let some go. The ones who were let go didn't like that. So they started a civil lawsuit that they brought back against Microsoft, claiming that they were owed pension, they were owed overtime, and some other benefits. Microsoft lost that lawsuit to the tune of $97 million. And back, it was one of those seminal cases that helped define and was like a watch out employers. Don't play that game where you have people who are temporary for 2 years. So it's something to keep in mind. So understand those definitions. The links will help you there. The kind of the highest level ways to think about it is, one, regular employees generally, especially employment at will, are not brought on for a specific amount of time. You're hiring them, and the agreement is they can leave, or you can ask them to leave with or without cause at any time. So that tends to be a very blanket kind of forever deal, whereas temporary and contract, the key is there's a time predetermined, defined, often in writing, that says, here's how long you're going to work for us. It is specialized work that has a certain degree of autonomy. Temporary employees, less autonomous, where you can be very directed in how the work gets done. Contract employees, the rule is that they have to be more autonomous, where you're paying them to get the work done, but you're not being as, you're not managing how it's getting won or getting done. They have to, you can't, what they call, exercise substantial control over the direction of their work. You can certainly say what needs to get done in the timeframes, but how they get it done is frankly part of what the beauty of having independent contractors, freelancers, and consultants is. You don't have to care how they're getting it done. You're just paying them to get it done. So the best practice is to make sure you're matching the type of employment relationship to your business strategy and your situation. At the same time, it's a great practice, and it's just a general thing, whether they're temporary or contract, you should always be a talent scout. I can't tell you the number of people that I've leaned on in the last year who crossed my trail in the previous 10. And it was because I was aware of their talent, and regardless of the employment relationship I had with them, and they helped me out with my startup business. I may or may not have paid them. And I've got a slide coming up that'll probably be of interest to you about how do you get work done by others for free.
Hey, Doug, on
Yes.
this issue of employee classification, I believe that this is not only an issue with the IRS, but the state of Connecticut will also look at this as well.
Yes. Oh, yes, indeed. So there's, this is at the very beginning, this is not, employment is not something to be taken informally. And that's where I've seen family relationships, friends, neighbors, kids of neighbors, that's where people can get in trouble, because you think it feels informal, but as soon as there's an employment verbal agreement or written agreement, it's suddenly there's state and federal laws that govern how that relationship is going to work. There's a rule in HR. Like I said, I've been in HR literally before the internet, if some of the younger folks can wrap their heads around how work actually got done before the internet. And in fact, I actually got my degrees before there was Google, which is a whole different level of work. But one of the rules in HR is you got to watch your front door. So if you want to type into chat, what do you think that means for your business? You got to watch the front door. Anybody putting in anything for my pop quiz here?
Sorry, I was on mute. Not yet.
All right.
Reputation is a question.
Yeah.
Adhere to labor laws.
Yeah. Yep, those are good. But what I'm referring to is be very careful who you let into your business. Once they're literally employed by you, getting them unemployed by you can be a whole different level of headache. So being very careful and taking the interview and selection process very seriously is kind of important. So I did want to spend some time talking about interviewing best practices. So let's go back to chat. On a scale of 1 to 5, for the audience right now, could you type into chat, how comfortable are you? How would you rate your interviewing skills? 1 meaning very, very, it's new to me. I wouldn't know where to start. 5 meaning, oh no, I've mastered that skill. I have no issues there at all.
Got some responses coming in here.
Okay.
I would say we're probably averaging a little north of 3.
Okay, good.
My quick math here.
Yeah. And I'm not bragging, but I've conducted literally thousands of interviews. In fact, I was in a logistics company once where we picked up the J.C. Penney account, and me and 2 other people had to hire 2,000 people to start up 5 different warehouses. Each one had 500 employees, 450 hourly, 50 management. And we traveled around the US. This was like in a 90-day period. It was a circus, but boy, was that like a master course in interviewing. So I wanted to share what I would consider the wisdom from my scar tissue database and experience of having conducted so many interviews. The interviews can be awkward by design. I mean, you're kind of assessing and they're trying to answer questions. It's somewhat of a big masquerade ball, but I wanted to pass along these tips. One is, if you haven't heard of it, one of the best predictive methods is using behavioral-based interview questions. Those in hiring somebody, the fact is, the past performance is an indicator of potential future performance, right? As human beings, there's certain qualities that we bring to our work that we've grown over our lifetimes. And in some ways you can predict, well, if you did that in your last job, you're probably going to do that in this job. And the rule that you'll find is that the soft stuff, which I'll talk about qualities, 4 qualities of hiring for startup talent, but that soft stuff that you're looking for is actually the hard stuff to nail down in an interview. So, and by that I mean, it's not the technical stuff. It's not, can they program? Can they do web pages? Can they do the technical components? It's more of, are they going to be a fit? Do they have the right characteristics that's going to make my talent shine in my organization? And that's harder to get from people. Behavioral-based interviewing, and I got a wonderful guide attached in this, put out by LinkedIn actually. And it has the 6 most common soft characteristics you're looking for: leadership, self-initiative, critical thinking, problem solving. And it has very specific questions to ask. And they tend to be, give me an example in your past where you lay out a scenario, and then that's like how you tee it up. And then whatever they say, there's a second question where you dig in to get some more specifics. But it's the basic model is you're asking them to share examples from their past of where they had to demonstrate that behavior. And then your follow-up question goes deep on something very specific that you need. And you'll find the best questions are the ones where the candidates actually have to stop and think. Boy, that's a good question. I've got to think about that. The other things that are in here, I'd say dig in. Two of my go-tos every interview. I always ask people towards the end. So just, once there's a rapport, so what kind of people bug you? It's a great question. Because what you want to be listening for is, number one, am I that person that bugs them? Because it could be. I've had candidates basically who are going to work for me describe me as the kind of person that bugs them, and it's good for me to know that. Or very often the people that bug us are people who are the opposite of what our strengths are. So, for example, I tend to be very innovative and all over the place. The type of people who bug me are the ones who get stuck in very linear processes and cannot innovate when the situation changes. Why? Because it's not me. So listen, what kind of people or projects bug people? It's a good insight into your screening against, are they walking into a situation that's potentially what their job is going to be or the people are going to work with? And another great question is, what have we not discussed that you were hoping to cover in this interview? And there may be some underlying things that would never occur to you that they want to get into. The answers are right there. I'm not going to get into detail, but I'll tell you some of the best practices I've picked up. Whoop, that's the wrong way. Hold on, page down. One is, if you're interviewing people and something goes off in your head that's like, whoa, that's weird. That's not going to work for me, or that's strange that they said that. Explore it real time with the candidate and say, can we just go back to what you just said? You said that, you don't work before noon every day. I just want to understand what's behind that. Rather than filing it away and saying, I'm not considering this candidate. And I found, when I get a red flag, I explore it. Very often the candidate, I didn't hear him correctly, or there was some legitimate reason why. Be clear on the process and timelines. The best thing you can say to a candidate is, this is going to take, we're interviewing people today, or we're expecting to fill the job in the next week or two. And here's how it's going to lay out. You don't ever want to make promises or talk in absolutes. Like, I'm going to make a decision in this Friday, and I'll be following back up with you. But given everything that you've said, I'm pretty sure that we're going to move forward and everything. That's called a verbal contract for employment. You can get in trouble with that. And then another best practice, I always close with an update agreement, which says, look, this is for good candidates. Somebody I'm really considering. Things that went really well today. I really appreciate your candidacy. I've got some more folks to talk with, and then I'll be getting back to people. But could you do me a favor? If anything changes in your situation, so for example, you get another offer, or you decide you're not looking for a job, could you please give me a call before you take any actions? And I've done that because I've lost good candidates who I went to offer a job, and they were like, man, you should have called me yesterday. Because I just accepted a job, or I just told my wife we're moving to Virginia, whatever. So closing with an update agreement, and inversely saying, if anything changes on my situation, I will let you know as well. And you should get back to every active candidate, because the people who tend to go legal on you or create trouble are the ones who feel disrespected. And as candidates, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to get back to everybody one way or the other. And then make sure you get back to them. But it's an update. It's a soft handshake saying, if anything changes for you or for me, we'll keep each other in the loop. So I do that with any of my solid best candidates.
Doug, one thing, if I could add,
Sure.
the behavioral interviewing was something that my company adopted when I worked there several years ago, and it's definitely creates a little bit of a different environment than people might be used to. One thing that I found is my interviewing technique was always looking at somebody's resume and saying, oh, so you worked at such and such. Tell me about that time. Yeah. And when I switched to behavioral interviewing, what I would do when I would start the interview is, because it could be kind of an awkward, like you said, the whole process is a little awkward.
Yeah.
I would start by saying, look, I looked at your resume. I can see everything you've done. I'm not going to, waste time having you recite your memory or recite your resume. I'd like to talk to you about, some examples of some experiences you've had. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions in the vein of, tell me about a time when. That way, that sets them at ease so that they know what's coming in terms of the form of the question. And
Right.
and if they feel like it's a little bit of a different interviewing style, they're immediately set at ease for what's going to be coming. I found
Right.
that helps just with the process and getting them to open up.
Yeah. And to your point, that's brilliant, Steve, because honestly, the intention is not to trick candidates. It's not to make them, it's not a stress interview because those don't work. It's, unless you're hiring like air traffic controllers or something, but for the rest of us, the more you can build that rapport and make the candidate at ease, let them know what's coming. The other watch out, I just covered this yesterday with one of my clients. You should never, ever tell the candidate all about the job at the beginning of the interview. I've had people do that because basically you're saying, please answer the questions this way. Um, it's it's definitely cool to do it at the end of the interview and especially if you're interested in them. But far too often I've had interviews start where somebody's like fully describes the job. And you're kind of leading the witness, not that you're trying to hide anything, but frankly, if they're not that good a candidate, why bother telling them what the job is? You're probably not going to bring them on. Yeah.
Well, you raise a really good point there that gets at two of the questions we got. So Mike had asked, what roles do I need to hire and how do I determine who will fill those roles? And then Liza said, what if you find the right person, but they aren't in the right role? Right. So you could find that you think you're looking for somebody who fits into this box for this role, but maybe you find somebody who brings a whole set of skill sets and you could shape that role differently to fit their skill sets better. Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or I'll share. I had there's a group that I worked with. They provide free talent to build websites and technology called Get Virtual, and it's a project team that you get for free. The team leader for that project was very good. And it was after the project concluded that I reached back out to her and hired her to do my search engine optimization analysis, which was not the role she was in, but it became clear she knew her stuff when it came to SEOs. So yeah, it comes back to that talent scout. Where can I truly leverage the talent portfolio? So, so that's interviewing best practices. And I'm going to spend a minute. How are we doing on time here? Are we about halfway through?
We are. It's 1:33.
All right. So let me talk about hiring startup talent. And I'm moving on the premise here, and I may be wrong, but that the majority of folks on the call, if you're, on that journey that I was on for the past year, trying to start up a business is tricky. And there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of pressures. And what I learned is that the goal of a startup is to not be a startup. You don't want to be in this kind of fuzzy front end of your business. You want things to settle down. But that journey can be more like a zigzag than a straight line. So when it comes to hiring folks, some four things that I'd like folks to consider. One is you want people who are flexible like Gumby. Even if you're hiring technical talent inch wide, mile deep, you're going to want employees who can adapt, who can shift when the circumstances or priorities shift. In a startup, I've been in IPOs and startups before, and literally we had a model that said, when we're skating on thin ice, our safety's in our speed. And you want people who can adjust and move and not get stuck, especially if you're hiring regular employees. I can almost guarantee you that the job that you're hiring for is going to change in the next 12 months. So you're going to need people who, and maybe not a wholesale change in a whole nother thing, but it'll grow and adapt and morph to be your business. So you're going to want people who are shapeshifters in some ways. The other thing is somebody who's collaborative and team oriented, meaning there's a shared sense of purpose. They get their job done, but they also buy into the vision and they buy in and can collaborate with other resources that are on the team. And we've all probably experienced that in our careers where you have individual contributors who really want to be individual contributors. In a startup, part of the magic is getting people to collaborate. I was in an IPO once. No, it was actually a startup of a new product line at a business. I was sitting with the mechanical engineers who literally had a new product sitting in the center of the table. I was the HR guy, and we were all brainstorming, what are we going to call this product? So I was part of the team that was kind of creating a marketing and product branding strategy, even though I was in HR. And you're going to want people who can contribute far beyond the boundaries of their job, or they're willing to contribute. Ultimately, they need to be results oriented. I've worked in large companies, like I said, 50,000, 250,000 employees, and I've worked in small companies, so one. In large companies, well, let's just say when everything is said and done, you want people who are getting more done than said, meaning you want results orientation, you want deadlines to be met. You don't want, what I've seen in large organizations, sometimes this tendency to let the perfect get in the way of good enough. So people who are embrace and rally to clear deadlines and accountabilities, very important, even though the flexibility is important as well. And then the final is something that I've learned about recently, has to do with using assessments that help. Depends on the kind of people that you're hiring. But if you haven't, there's a whole new world of assessments that allow you to check out people's cognitive abilities, personalities, and interests. You may have had some of these in your careers with DISC assessments and everything, but they've been shown to be very good predictive indicators, especially when you have a complex role that you need to fill that's central to success. Using an assessment, a pre-employment assessment. Some of these groups, I'm working with a group called Telexis, which can actually customize the assessment to fit your jobs, which is kind of cool. They have a base, they have a pool of standard jobs. I think there's 100 something of them, but then they work with you to customize it to your jobs. And that becomes an assessment they give to all the candidates. And then you can see how they measure up against, what is the standard and against each other. So it's kind of cool. So 4 things, it's a little different when you're in the startup space than you are in a large sustaining success type of business model. But those are things to consider. And again, using the proper interviewing techniques helps uncover some of these things. I wanted to share, and I think it's, it fits into this realm of the portfolio of options out there. And you can see just the growth that's expected of this gig economy. You've probably read articles on it. You've probably ridden with an Uber driver who told you about it, but it's the new normal. And it's projected that in 2027, 86.5 million people will be freelancing in the US. That's going to represent, if the projections hold true, over half of the workforce in the US will be freelancing. Now, it doesn't mean they're full-time freelancing. They could be doing gigs on the side. I know a lot of people that I work with who are doing that, and a lot more who want to do that. And so we're in this gig economy. While I was working full-time in generally director level roles, I've taught online courses at 2 universities for 10 years now. So that was my side hustle all the time. I was building courses and teaching courses. Then I even was doing consulting gigs when an ex-employer would call me and say, hey, can you come in and do this training thing or whatever? So, the gig economy is, I think, in part in parallel with the Great Resignation, where people are leaving standard employment arrangements and striking out on their own and saying, I'm going to try and cobble together an income that suffices for what I need to make. What I've done is I did some research. Here's, I tried to organize them by what they are. All the links will be in the presentation. But this is where you can find some good talent out there who you can bring on generally on this contract basis. And so I put this in here to just remind folks that it's a new world out there, and that there is lots of talent available who will work for competitive wages in a very focused way. So, but will they work for free? The answer is yes. Some folks work for free. So let me share some experiences and things. Internships and mentoring. You can have and set up a formal mentoring program, or get mentored by other people. And I think SCORE is a great example. I can't tell you the number of webinars and the advice and counsel I've gotten over the last 12 months that was free from the SCORE organization. It was a wonderful opportunity to tap into talent that helped me with everything from my marketing strategy to my pricing strategy to literally, I got a template for my business startup, my business plan startup. So look for mentors and potentially mentoring other people and doing internships. I am on a land trust board in the town that I work in, and I've set the goal of doubling the membership over the next 12 months. I will be reaching out to the local universities in Connecticut, there's 3 of them, and asking them if there is, one of the things we need to do is create a new website and whole social media buzz around the land trust. And I think there's an opportunity for the right college student who would love to help with this kind of socially conscious group, and help with marketing, website, all the things that they don't have a budget to pay for. So it's a win-win. So I'll be working with the schools to either pull in some interns or do some local universities where people are willing to offer up their services. Bartering is very real as well. In fact, there's some websites out there. But what I've done over the last 12 months is there's a lot of quid pro quo where people are helping each other, either informally, where I'm bouncing, like my website design, I sent it out to about 8 people and said, I've got these 2 designs. Can you give me feedback on which one you would like, which one most appeals to you? And would you be willing to be part of my kind of guiding counsel as I bring this site up? And people were like, sure. I've bartered. There was a kid that was the son of one of my colleagues who was going first job out of college. I helped him negotiate a $5,000 raise in that offer. So he got $5,000 more than they offered and free parking in Miami, which is a big deal. He turned around and built my web pages for me as a way of just this bartering. It wasn't intentional, it just played out that way. After he got into the employer, I said, hey, you're designing web pages for a living. Would you help design mine given, this? And he was like, sure. And if you go to my site, the Transform Performance Partners, he literally built that site. I had the vision and the content, but he built it. That LinkedIn Premium and LinkedIn, your LinkedIn network. And if you're a LinkedIn Premium member, you can post a free job up on LinkedIn. So you can create an opening and post it as if it's a real job and people will apply for it via LinkedIn. I think premiums you get 1 free one, it may be more than that. So it doesn't cost you anything to post. And then Get Virtual. I would encourage everybody to take a look at the Get Virtual organization. It's an organization that was started out of Silicon Valley by some entrepreneurs. It's specifically to help businesses that were either starting up or being impacted by the pandemic. And what they do is they match businesses to colleges that they've partnered with. And those business services are primarily around technical services like website design, SEO optimization, marketing strategies, et cetera. In real world, I have my another well, Transform Performance Partners is an example of where they helped with that. And then I have another business called HR Career Paths, where I partnered with them, and they not only built the site, but they also were the demographic of, because they were college kids, graduating college kids generally in their latter years of their education. They were literally the demographic of my other business, which is helping early to mid-career HR professionals have breakthrough career experiences. So if you get a chance, check out getvirtual.org. I found them incredibly helpful. They form a project team. They give you a proposal. If you're approved, the schools. I had one group from Southern Connecticut State University, and I had another one from the University of Southern California, where the team was actually somebody in China, somebody from South Korea, and two people from the U.S. Very good organization. So they're out there, and if you get a chance, you can check out my sites, and you'll see the kind of work that they do. And check out their site, and you can actually enroll right on their site that you're interested in becoming one of their potential businesses that they help. So that's the Will Work for Free, which is as a startup, and a very unique way to think about bringing on talent. And then I want to close with the employment law and other considerations. As we said at the beginning, there's really nothing informal about employing others, even if it's just one person. It gets super formal if you ever cross over that 50 employee line. The state and the federal groups, you just entered into another realm of legal employment law implications. But so make sure you match your employee type to the situation. And the final two things, there is talent available if you're open to it, and using people in your networks and the resources like the Small Business Association, SCORE, the Society for Human Resource Managers actually has a lot of good HR employment related stuff on their site. And then like some of the links I put in, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are the ones who have some guidelines on things you're going to want to pay attention to in employing others. Real entrepreneurs do get to that point where they're going to have to shift from me to we, and that time in building your business and helping it expand is a really exciting time. When you're not only doing the work yourself and the limits that come with that, but now you're getting work done with and through others. It opens up a whole new world of possibility. But as I said at the beginning, big asterisk, if you're going to want to seek professional counsel, if you have questions, then I would definitely check with some professional groups, including SCORE, in terms of advice. So I think that's it. We tend to associate getting one of the, I hope it sounds like I hit on some of the things that the price of admission that folks have indicated were important to them. I know that for many of us, we associate getting work done with paying people for it. And I hopefully innovated some things that help you get some assistance with your business without spending a lot of money. And then ultimately, I am fueled. I'm on the planet to do cool things with cool people who generally are attempting the seemingly impossible, which is probably a lot of the folks on this call. So if you want to connect after this call and get into some more detail or just network and have some conversations, I'd be totally open, and I would embrace that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Steve. And I don't know if we have time for questions or.
We do. We still have some time left for questions. So if folks have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I did get a few in the Q&A box that were more in the vein of legal advice.
Okay.
Doug and I are not lawyers, so I'm going to just say if you've got legal questions, our best advice is to consult with a business attorney. if you need advice on that front, because we can't give you legal advice on this webinar. Shonda did have a good question, Doug, that I'm not sure if you could answer. Do you have any information on non-disclosure agreements or your thoughts on those?
You mean hiring people who are still under a non-disclosure agreement? Or is it to put a non-disclosure agreement in a contract that you're doing?
She didn't specify, but maybe if
Okay.
you could cover both aspects of it,
Sure.
that would be helpful.
Let me cover the second one first. So non-disclosure agreements, I literally had to update and pay for my professional liability insurance today, like 3 hours ago. And I went through it with my insurance broker. And in my contracts, I did not have a disclosure agreement. He says, you should have a disclosure agreement. I mean, just a brief one. It doesn't have to be like a patent agreement, but there should be some lines about who owns the content. And me, like in the work I do, I hear a lot of proprietary information, and that so on that side, I literally am updating my contracts. Even on PayPal, I do coaching where I use PayPal. And in that, I'm going to add in a disclosure agreement. So when they pay me via PayPal, there's language in there. In terms of hiring people who are under disclosure agreements, this is one, it's an area, my knowledge goes back a ways from when I was hiring scientists. I was in the high tech field. Scientists and salespeople is where they really clamp down. And in some cases, technology people on the disclosure agreements, and rightly so. That intellectual knowledge is their product. I would definitely check with what the latest thinking on that was, because it used to be they were very easy to enforce, but I think they've eroded. But I think some states, I think it varies by state and stuff, but they used to be very scary things when hiring somebody on. We used to, in HR, we used to have to really look into it. But I think there was some court rulings recently, and I mean in the last 5 years, where they found them unenforceable because you're restricting somebody's employment. But that's a great area where if I was considering a candidate who had one, or I was thinking of put one in place, that's like, because I'm in the kind of business where I have to protect my proprietary products or information, I would definitely be getting some counsel on that for sure.
Yeah, and non-compete agreements are probably in that same space, right? Yep.
Yeah.
So we do have a few more minutes if folks have any other questions. I got a good one from Deborah. She asked if you could identify the differences between exempt and non-exempt status.
Yeah, so exempt and non-exempt, it's governed by the Fair Labor Standards Act. And oh boy, so there's an 8-factor analysis that's conducted, and this is just my HR stuff, but so there is and you can find it on their site, there is literally a worksheet that you go through and you answer questions, and it will help you determine, it's a guideline, what type of employee is this? And then there's some general, and I think in one of the links I may have this, it has to do with like the areas that they look at is there a financial or fiduciary impact of this role, or or not? Is the work that they're doing primarily governed by existing processes and protocols, or is it a creative endeavor where you're paying them to use a high degree of autonomy in their day-to-day work, things like that. So I guess the headline is it's not made up. It's in some areas, I think there's a lot of myth around, is this hourly, or should I be getting paid hourly or salary? The government has made it very, very clear where those lines are. And I would definitely go to that EEOC site or the IRS site and pull down what I think is called the 8-factor analysis worksheet, and that will help. Worth noting, part of what Microsoft, when they got in trouble, there were some employees who were determined to be hourly, not just contract, but hourly contract employees. And I remember the headline in HR was that the way, so how do you determine somebody who worked for you 2 years what you owe them in overtime because you have no records of what they worked. So the IRS basically said, we're going to ask the employees how many hours they worked every week, and then you're going to pay them for anything over 40, which is like, wow, there's a nightmare scenario. Yeah, it's you're definitely going to want to do your homework in determining that. Yeah.
Yeah, Deborah just added to us that she lives and works in Rhode Island, and that exempt or non-exempt status is audited. So just
Yeah.
to be very careful on how you classify that. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's some great information in here, Doug. You know, I've not as many as you, but I've interviewed a lot of people over the years and hired a lot of people over the years. I found that culture fit is a big aspect in looking for somebody. I probably told you when we first started working together that I used to use the phrase, I'm looking for a good athlete. I can teach them the playbook, to continue the analogy, if they didn't understand the intricacies of the business that we were in, but they had a strong work ethic, ability to learn, partner and work in groups, good customer service mindset. You could teach them the details of the business, the system, et cetera. But those intangibles go a long way towards work ethic and culture fit, were things that I saw. And you hit on a lot of those today, especially around the behavioral interviewing.
Yeah. That, and as I mentioned, those assessments, they've come a long way. And some of them, like the Telexis ones, they're using new technology and new stuff. Some of the longer standing ones, like DISC and, well, there's a whole lot of them. They may have been screening for things that made sense like 30 years ago when they came into the marketplace. But those are another way to, determine fit. Yeah.
Good. All right, we're just about at the end of the hour. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat here. I want to thank everybody for joining today, for your engagement, for your great questions, and Doug, thanks to you. Doug's contact info is up here. If you want to reach out to him, you can check out his website. And again, we will be sending a link with the recording out probably later today or tomorrow, also with a copy of this document. So you can refresh or you can revisit the content and check out the links he sent as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining today. Again, if you need any more information about SCORE or interested in partnering up with a mentor, you can find that at score.org, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.